Welcome to South of Left Field. My name is Jimmy, and I am here today from this perspective to talk about the lies associated with voting. Now, let's begin with just voting, okay? I mean, this is a presidential election year, and of course, there'll be between elections, we get to vote once every 2 years. We all have one vote, and ideally, in a working democracy, our vote represents one of the many notes that are sounded from the voices of the electorate directed to politicians, hopefully selecting politicians to represent our best interests and to represent our voices in the halls of Congress. Now, I've talked in the past about the fact that the vast majority of the members of the House and the Senate, the White House, actually all of the halls of our various governments, and in many cases our state governments as well, all of the people that occupy these positions, or the vast majority of these people, are all members of the upper class. Now this matters, and it's about to matter a whole lot more. I mean, we've got problems today. We've got this pandemic going on. We've got a death toll at 71,000 that's rising at something over 1,000 deaths a day. We still have a lot of people, including representatives of our upper class government, that like to present this as nothing more than a flu. The death toll has already risen more than any flu that we've experienced in the last decade. So yeah, it's a little worse than that. But more than that, we've also got a tremendous amount of debt that the government is accruing in trying to keep people afloat. And of course, they have spent a great deal more money on corporation and financial institutions than they have on taking care of the general population. Probably something on the order of maybe $1.10 is even directed in our general direction. So what has this got to do with voting? Okay, here's what it's got to do with voting. Decisions are being made as to when people are going to be forced to return to their jobs. I don't know that those decisions are ones that are driven by the needs of the society. I know you've got to have food workers. I know you've got to have grocery stores. There are things that are essential. But when you've got governors that are saying, hey, let's open tattoo parlors, I have to ask myself, what is the driver behind that? How is that beneficial to the broad good? Rather, it looks like it's beneficial to some financial need. Well, the upper class, of course, they need their money, they need their income, they need their wealth. It's what they use to separate themselves from us in the lower classes. The government's going to be what makes these decisions, state government and federal government. So that brings us to voting. Folks, look, there's only two parties in this country. The argument has been put forward to us for years. I've heard it all my life. You can't ever have more than two parties. Well, you know what? That's a bald-faced lie. There is absolutely nothing to prevent larger third and fourth parties from arising. The only thing that even vaguely suggests that you can only have two parties is a presidential election. And even that is not that important because taxing, spending, laws, regulations, all of these things are found in the House and the Senate. The judiciary and presidential appointments are approved by the Senate. You've got to have the Senate to approve foreign treaties. Congress has a tremendous amount of power, and we are a lot closer to the congressman than we are to the president. Here you're talking about a singular office that the whole nation gets to point to. Well, guess what? I got a much more direct communication link between myself and my representative from the House, or even my senator, because they're stuck with just the state. And I'm a bigger proportion of the state than I am of the whole country. And so are you. So we're told there can only be two parties. Well, okay. That's a bald-faced lie. There is not one single solitary legal reason why there can't be multiple parties. The two parties control the states determine how elections are carried out. If you want to get into an interesting story, look into Maine, where ranked choice voting was was put into place. There was a referendum. The people, by and large, they voted in this referendum and they said, we want ranked choice voting. Their elected officials overruled the voting that they did and said, no, you can't have it. And then the people in turn turned around and they overrode their legislators. Now, that should tell you something. The majority of the population of the state said they wanted a particular style of voting that made it easier for independents and small third parties to get people into office. That's the biggest thing about ranked choice voting. You do one vote, you don't have to worry about a runoff. And I'll provide a link to describe ranked choice voting. It's not complicated. From your perspective, you pick your first choice, your second choice, your third choice. And the candidates who don't get a significant number of votes, people who pick them first, their votes are redirected to those people's second choice. It's a great way to avoid runoffs, and like I said, it makes it much easier for independents and for third and fourth parties to get people elected. That's why the two main parties, Republicans and Democrats, didn't want to see it in place. The people of Maine had to override their own so-called elected officials. Well, if these were really elected officials, they wouldn't have tried to override the people to begin with. So that should tell you something. As far as votes go, another thing they like to tell us that if you don't vote for one of the two main parties, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your vote. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm looking at two parties today. I'm looking at two candidates today, and they make me want to hurl. I wouldn't vote for them for dog catcher. Lord help me, I'm not going to vote for them as the President of the United States of America. I've seen one in action, and I really don't want to see the second. So what does this mean? Well, I'll tell you what. If I hold my nose like I've been told to do, if I hold my nose and I cast a vote for somebody that I feel that much revulsion for, that is a wasted vote. The only other way to waste a vote is to not use it. So what does that mean for me personally? Okay, here's my example. I live in a state, there's only 3 parties out there that are recognized by the state. Now, that third party doesn't excite me. I wouldn't get out and march in the streets in support of them. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go down through that ballot, and if it's got an R behind it or it's got a D behind it, I am not going to put my vote there. But my vote is going to be cast. It's going to be cast for every independent I can find. And it's going to be cast, and I don't care if I cast it for a wingnut. Because what I am telling these two major parties and what I am telling the current crop of politicians is there is an active voter out here, and he doesn't back you. Now that's me sitting south of left field, but I'm here to tell you something. I'm not wasting my vote. I'm not going to be told what does or does not constitute a wasted vote. That is my vote. That is my voice. That is my position, and I want you to feel the same way about it. You should be outraged as I am outraged because what we are confronted with is extraordinary mediocrity. Lapdogs of the upper class whose ways into office are paid for by organizations who are paid donations from wealthy corporations and wealthy individuals. And I know a lot of people talk about that. They like to bash Wall Street. They like to bash wealth. Well, they should be bashing wealth because wealth is the only voice that the current political system recognizes. So that's a lie to tell me there can't be a third party. Because if there was a third party, I mean, there's only like 35, 38% that are registered Democrat and about the same number registered Republicans. The people who are not registered in either party outnumber either party, which means there could just as easily be 3 parties. And you know what? To say that that third party doesn't have power, when you deny the 2 existing parties a majority of anything, they have to listen to you. They've got to cut a deal. And suddenly, third party has a value. It has power, it has influence, and it opens the table to new ideas. It gives us a path to potentially have our voices heard. That's why I'm sitting out here south of left field. So that's one lie. Actually, that's both the lies. If you don't vote for one of the main parties, you're wasting your vote. No, I'm not. I only waste my vote if I use it voting for something that makes me sick to my stomach. And the second lie is that there can't be a third party. So why isn't there a third party? So I'm going to tell you this. You have to be committed to the fight. And it doesn't have to be serious. You don't have to storm the ramparts of the Bastille. You don't have to fill the streets and everything else. But I'll tell you what, if more Americans felt the way that I do, if more Americans came to the conclusion that I did, if significant numbers of Americans took their votes to the poll, let's take that dog out for a walk. Take your vote to the poll and vote for everything but a Republican and a Democrat. And what happens is, when votes start appearing in those other columns, when numbers start rising in organizations other than these two main parties, then leaders will arise from the numbers. We're sitting around here waiting for some leader to come in and galvanize us and lead us all to glory. No, it doesn't work that way. It's going to take a lot of years. It's going to take a lot of voting cycles. It'll take longer than probably I have left. But you know what? The only way that change is going to come about is when people decide there needs to be change. They'll only walk on the 90% for as long as the 90% are willing to lay down and be walked on. I'm not willing to lay down and be walked on anymore. And I'm not willing to buy into their lies. Yes, there can be other parties. And no, I'm not going to waste my vote by doing what you tell me to do. A vote for a Republican or a vote for a Democrat in hopes of changing America, changing the economy, improving our lot in life, making education available to our children, improving the care of our citizens. Voting for either one of those two parties is a waste. They've been in power for 150 years between them. They haven't given us anything yet. But you go back to my playground example from earlier on in this series, when I talked about 10 kids in the playground and you got $10, what does wealth distribution in America look like today? One kid's got $7 and everybody else has got to get by on 3. Just a few decades ago, it was 6 and 4. So you see which way the trend is going. The trend is going the 90% has less and the 10% has ever more. The only thing that we have that they can't control, if we decide to use it for our own selves, is our vote. We outnumber them. Don't waste your vote. If you walk up to your polling station or you sit down to your mail-in ballot and you have to hold your nose, please stop a moment and ask yourself, what are you doing and why? This is not what the founders had in mind. Founders didn't plan for political parties. But we've been sold a bill of goods. It serves the parties and only the parties. If we accept their argument that there can only be the two of them and nothing else and there's no other choices, and we serve them, if we accept their argument that not voting for them is a wasted vote. So they're going to see at least one vote in a column that says, here I am, I'm active, and I don't support you. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll share this. I hope this gives you pause. Please consider joining me in South of Left Field, or go find something else north or south of any other part of the political spectrum. But if you want to be heard and you want to have a powerful voice, you're going to have to get off and get up with people like yourself who will not be led by the nose by the lies of the two existing parties we have today. Thank you.